Hello and welcome to Tableau tutorial. My name is Michelle and I'm with the Simplilearn team. Today we're going to be learning about Tableau, what it is and why it's important. We'll talk about connecting to data and different joins. We'll look at dimensions and measures and their differences. We'll look at the Tableau interface and then we'll walk through building some dashboards. So what is Tableau? Here's a story about these two gentlemen talking about Tableau. The first gentleman comments on how the IPL Cricket League was very entertaining this year, and how he believes that de Villiers scored the maximum runs. But the second gentleman says he has stats which shows that Kohli outperformed this time. How did you come up with these stats? There's a tool that helps visualize data by creating interactive charts and graphs. It's basically a business intelligence tool used by many organizations for visual data analysis. Tableau helps us gain insights by visualizing the data that you already have. So Tableau is important when it comes to visualization. It has many advantages. First, it has speed of analysis, so you can get into your data and start analyzing it very quickly. Second, it helps users be self-reliant and not rely on very difficult analytics tools to start digging into their data. Third, it allows you to do visual discovery, so as you're building, you can learn information and insights about your data. 4, you can use it to blend diverse data sets. And 5, you can use the data sets that are centralized, so after you've put together a data set, you can publish it out and more people can use it than just you. That sounds interesting. How about we visually show the stats of IPL? So first, we'll look at connecting to data. This will be the first step in Tableau. So if you've opened up your workbook and you see this page, you can click here, Connect to Data, and we're going to choose a text file, and we're going to join our deliveries data to our matches data. So when we click deliveries, it brought in deliveries, and we can click add and bring in another text file called matches. Next, we'll talk about joins. We will make use of joins when we have multiple data sets to work with. Suppose we want to join these two data sets, one of which has a team ID and what city that team is in. The other one has a team ID and tells you the name of the team. There are 4 ways to join data sets. An inner join, the resulting table contains values that have matches in both tables. So we can see here that we have Delhi and the Delhi Daredevils. We also have Chennai and the Chennai Super Kings. We have Bangalore, and then we have this team that doesn't exist in Bangalore. And so, since these two don't match, since we have 2, 2, 3, 3, but then we have 4 and 6, these two don't exist in our resulting table because they don't have matches in both tables. In a left join, resulting table contains all values from the left table and the corresponding matches from the right table. So we have Delhi, Chennai, and Bangalore, and then we have their matches. However, Bangalore does not have a match, so it is left null. In a right join, we have the opposite. The resulting table contains all matches from the right table and the corresponding matches from the left table. So we have the Daredevils, the Super King, and then we have King Punjab, and they all exist. However, number 6 does not have a corresponding city, and so that's left null. And in a full outer join, the resulting table contains all values from both tables. So we still have Delhi and Chennai, and we have Bangalore, and we have the Kings, but their corresponding nulls exist as well. So since this one doesn't have a match, it still shows up, but you get a null, and then this one doesn't have a match, it also still shows up, and you get a null. Now it's going to allow us to join our 2 different data files together. So we have to decide which field to join on. In this case, it is match ID. And then on the matches, it's just called ID. And that is ID. We'll do an inner join that will select only the records that match between the 2 fields. So it's given us some sample data underneath from our 2 things. And we look at match ID here, and where it's 1 here, we'll scroll over and see that it's 1 here for ID. If we scroll down and find a different number, so here we have 2 for ID, and we scroll over and match ID is now 2. And we have our join in place. Dimensions and measures. Dimensions are qualitative fields that cannot be aggregated. For example, batsman and batting team, etc. However, measures are numerical values that mathematical functions can work on, like batsman runs and extras. So for the case of batsman runs, you can sum up all of the runs for an entire game, or that took place in a city, or for an individual batsman, and that's how you can tell that it works with a mathematical function. Now we'll move on to the last part of dashboard designing. So we can move on to sheet 1. I will take a second and load our query. And now we have the worksheet space, and this is where we can build our visualization. This is called a worksheet. You can also build a dashboard, which is where you can put multiple worksheets together. And you can build what's called a story, which is where you can take worksheets and dashboards and put them in an order to tell a story. So on our worksheet, we'll have this space here in the middle, which is where you can build the visualization. You have columns and rows where you can drag on your data, which is here on the left. Here's our data, dimensions on top, measures on bottom. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We have columns and rows where you can drag your information, and it defines where the columns go, or where the data goes to define the columns, and where the data goes to define the rows. We have places here, these are our cards, and when you drag things onto these different cards, it will do different things to your visualization. And let's talk about our dimensions and measures. So Tableau will take its best guess at what your data is. So it's guessed that all of these blue fields on the top are dimensions, and dimensions are qualitative data, so data that defines and describes the rest of your data. And so usually it can be things like city, so you can say here's a city, and then we can look at our different measures by the city that it took place in. For example, with financial data, you could pull on city and you could look at sales by city, and city is the dimension, which is a quality. And then sales would be a measure, which is something that is quantitative and it is able to be aggregated, whereas dimensions are not things you would like to aggregate. So some things can be a number, but they're still not a measure, such as a phone number. Nobody is going to want to sum up different people's phone numbers and see what the sum of the phone number is. However, you might want to look at a customer and see their phone number, and it puts it up in the dimension area. Another thing that Tableau does in this case, by default, it will make little folders for your different data sources. So we have our deliveries data source and our matches data source. If we go back to our data source section, that corresponds to our two different files. You can also look at these sample fields here, and the part where it's blue at the top represents the blue table. And if we keep dragging, we'll see the orange coming in, which represents the orange table. So here we are back at sheet 1. And let's start building our first visualization. I'm going to right click here, click rename, and we're going to call it matches in each venue. So we're going to start off by making a map. Tableau has recognized the word city here and put this little globe next to it, meaning that it has recognized it as having the geographic role of city. So if I double click on it, it maps out some cities. Now it's having a hard time mapping the cities, so we're going to click edit location, and it doesn't recognize these places, or it could exist in multiple places because it's defaulted the country to the United States. So if we change that defaulted country to India, then we have much fewer unknown fields. So we're going to focus on India and not look at these other locations because some of these are not in India, but we're going to make this visualization for India specifically. If you wanted to show what countries they were in, you can define from what field you can find the country information. So if we had two fields in here, one was city and one was country, that told you what country it was, then you would choose this from field and you'd choose that country dimension. And that would fix our problem, assuming things were spelled right and put in the right countries. In this case, we don't have country, so we have defined India, and that's where we're going to focus. Next, we're going to bring city onto color as well. And now they each have their own colors, and here's our legend. And we want these to have a different size based on how many matches they've had. So we're going to bring on ID onto size. And we want it to actually count those IDs. So we changed it to a count distinct. And now you can see the littlest ones have around 2, and then as they get bigger, this size is 20 and this size is 85. And when you hover, you can see exactly how many they have. You can adjust the size using this size marks card. Make our circles a little bit bigger. We can adjust our color by adding a border, maybe like a black border, but then changing the opacity so we can see through it a little bit for those that go over borders and start to overlap. And if we wanted to see the exact number without having to hover, we could take this ID onto label and again change it to count distinct. There we go. And now you can see exactly how many there are in each location. You can change where the labels show up by adjusting the alignment, so we could have it in the center and it kind of shows up inside their circles, but that's kind of hard to read in these smaller circles. So we could define that we always want it at the top or something like that. We could also have it say the city name. So if I drag city onto label, now it shows 9 and then the city, but if I want to change the order of that, see how it does the count and then the city? I could drag. So you saw right inside of here we have 2 that are on label, so they have this little T inside of a box. And now city is on top of count of ID. So city and then count. We could also allow people to filter. So if we click show filter here, and if we just want to look, it'll zoom in on the countries you select. So if we just wanted to look at a couple of them, then we could select individual ones. Or if we wanted to exclude certain ones, then we can make it easy to exclude. Great, so now we have our visualization for matches in each venue. Next, we're going to make another worksheet by clicking down here, and we're going to name this one Top Run Scorers. And this will allow us to be able to find who scores the top runs. So we're going to make a visualization called a tree map using this Show Me button. We haven't explored Show Me yet. Show Me will show you what visualizations you can build based on what you've selected over here. So when we selected city, it shows us that we can make maps using city. What we're going to do is look at city, and I'm going to hold Control and click Batsman, and I'm going to hold Control and click Batsman Run. And now you can see that tree map is filled in and not grayed out anymore, so we can select that. And it is showing us what batsmen have the most runs. We want the color to be based on city, so let's drag city onto color. And now we can see that it's separated out by city. And you can see that the person at the very top right with the biggest square has the most runs. But then you also get the second benefit of being able to know which city seems to have the most runs associated with it. So it looks like Mumbai has the most runs. Let's also filter this information. So let's bring on batsman runs, and then we can choose sum. And let's filter out batsmen who didn't get a total of 400 runs. There we go. So now we only see batsmen and cities that have a sum bigger than 400 runs. Okay, so we have city on label, but maybe we just want to be able to see that on hover. So we'll take city off of label, and now we just see the batsmen who have the highest runs for each city. And we'll also bring on the number of runs onto label. So now we can see the batsmen and their runs and exactly how many runs they have. You can always get to how many they have based on hover. We'll go on to our next visualization, and that's going to be win percent based on toss decision. So we're going to see which decision you make based on the toss leads to a win more often. So you can choose to bat or you can choose to field. And if you choose to bat, do you win more than if you choose to field? So let's take a look. We have our toss decision, and we also have if they won the match or not, match winner. And I'm going to control click toss decision, and we're going to select pie. So here we have a pie chart that colors it based on toss decision, which is bat and field, and makes the angle and the size of the circle based on the match winners. Now we're only going to have the angle be based on match winner or not, and then we can define the size ourselves so we can make it bigger. I'm going to change this visualization to fit the entire view so that we can see the pie better. Great, but we don't see a percentage. So let's change this sum of match winners to a table calculation. So we're going to click add table calculation, and we're going to change it to percent of total. We'll close that. So now when we hover, it says 60% of the matches were won by the people who chose field, and 39% were won by the people who chose bat. Let's make this into a label as well. So I'm going to control drag toss decision onto label, and what that does is make a copy and add it to label instead of pulling it off of color. So let's see what happens if I don't hold control. So if I just drag toss decision onto label, it got rid of it off of color and just put it on the label, and that's confusing. There's two pieces, but they don't look any different. So control drag fixes that. We'll do the same thing for that match percent of total that we made, match win percent of total. One of the benefits of having these labels here is that it allows you to be able to use this visualization even if you take a screenshot and send it to somebody and they can't hover over the top and see what everything means. Another thing you can do is annotate it, and so we can click annotate the point or the mark, and it will give you this box, and then it will put in some information that's showing up in your tooltip, and you can modify this, and we could change this so it's not bold anymore or leave it bold. And when you hit OK, it makes this box that you can move. Tells you information about that point or that mark. We can do the same thing here. It draws a line. And this allows you to put notes about it. You can see that these parts are dynamic, so it just fills in toss decision based on your field from over here, and it will change if it changes. So will the percent match winner. So for example, this is for everybody over all time, but if we show a filter for city, it adds it to our filters card up here, and then we could filter it to just this city, and you can see that they have updated. And in this city, they have more people who have chosen to bat win the game. And so you don't end up with old static information in either place. But if you did want to make a note manually about what you think is happening here, then you can do that as well. We could also do the same thing with date. And now you could choose just what year you want to see, so just 2017. And in 2017, the field advantage was a lot higher. And here's 2016. And that's all time. Our next visualization is going to explore the idea of if you win the toss, how likely you are to win the game. So we're going to look at historical data and see what's happened in the past. So we're going to call this advantage of toss winning. So we're going to bring on all of the toss winning teams, and we're going to also bring on all of the teams that actually won. So how it works is we can see all of the teams, and then you can see if they won or not. So we're going to quickly make a couple of changes to this. The first one is this team changed its name to this team name, so we're going to group those two teams into the same group so that they are treated like just one. And we're going to create a group based off of winner. And we're going to grab the two team names by control clicking and click group, and it puts them together. Let's replace winner with our winner group. There you go. So now you can see those two teams are together. Do the same thing with toss winner. Create group. One disadvantage to creating a group is that it's very manual. And so you have to manually create the group, and you have to manually update it. So if they change their name again, you have to change it again. And it's nice to have the functionality in Tableau to make those changes in case you don't have the functionality to make the changes to the data source itself. But do keep in mind that if you have to manually group things together, you have to manually keep it updated as well. Next, we're going to exclude some data. So we have this null here that we'll just click exclude on, because that would be perhaps when a winner was not declared. And we're going to remove some of these teams that have holes in their analysis. And that could happen because they didn't play all of the teams, or so there was never a match with that team. And so here, for example, they played and they could have won, or this team could have won, this team could have won, or this team could have won. But these other teams don't seem to have any matches against them. So we can come across here for the winners, and I'll control click the teams that we're excluding, and then we'll just come over here to exclude, and you can exclude a bunch at a time. It just adds it to the filters right here. So if I right click on edit filter, you can see all the teams we've excluded. And then we'll do the same thing on the toss winners. And we'll control click and exclude. And now we are left with all of the teams that seem to have available data between them. And now we want to see, of these toss winners, who won the game. So we're going to count all of the matches, and that will give us the information we need. So I'm going to grab ID and put it onto text. Now what it's doing is giving me all of the IDs. So I've got to right click on it and change it to a measure and change it to count distinct. And now it will show you how many matches fit these categories. So for this team, if they won, when this team wins the toss, then this team usually wins, which is the same team. So I'm going to widen this out so we can see the names better. So when the Super Kings win the toss, the Super Kings won the game 42 times. Let's right click here and we're going to change it to a table calculation again for percent of total. And what that is saying is that of all of the games where the Super Kings won the toss, they also won the game 64% of the time. Now, you can read this with the numbers fairly easily, but it'll be a lot easier if we can also show it in color. So I'm going to change the marks to square. And I'm going to control drag this onto color. And now we have what's called a heat map. And the color is stronger where the percentage is higher. You can see our range over here. So you can see there's a pretty clear advantage to the person who wins the toss. They tend to be the one that wins the game. When the Daredevils win the toss, the person who wins the game the most is the Daredevils. Let's take this visualization and use it to analyze a different feature of the game. So I'm going to right click on the worksheet and I'm going to click duplicate. So now we have the same visualization twice. And I will rename it to be called batting first advantage. So here, instead of toss winner, we're going to bring on batting team. But let's first create a group again. So we're going to, don't be confused by group by, that's not the same thing. We'll go to create and click group. We're going to put together, control click the team names that have merged. Okay. And let's drag. You see how it's not up here right next to batting team? That's because they put the calculated fields that we've been making outside of the folders. So if you're looking for a calculated field, you can scroll down to the very bottom. And let's drag batting group right over top of toss winner. And it will replace it right out of there. And we have our gaps again, because the toss winners that we excluded only applied to that toss winner. So I can pull off this toss winner filter. We don't need it anymore. And then we will control click on the ones with the gaps that we wanted to remove. Click exclude. Okay. And now we have an analysis showing how the batting team does. In our next visualization, we're going to explore who the leading batsman is. And this could allow you to find out who's the best if you were in charge of putting together your team. So we can take all of the batsmen and put it on row. So now we have a list of every batsman. And we can bring batsman runs onto columns, and it will sum up all of their runs. Now what we can do is sort it from biggest to smallest, and we can see who are our top batsmen. We can bring batsmen onto color, so I'm control dragging again. And then they each get their own color. One nice thing that you could do here is filter it by the team. So here we have like team 1 and team 2, but what we would be doing is filtering it on batting team. So we're going to click show filter. And so if you wanted to see, well, like this is the best overall, but let's see who was the best to ever work for this team. And then it will sort it from best down. And you can switch the team. And if we choose this one, we should choose this one as well. And then we can see who's the best. Another thing that could be really useful is seeing who's the best by year. So we can come here to date and click show filter. And now we can see this is the best overall of these years. But if we just want to see most recently who's the best, that's a very different story. So filters can be very handy for looking at a bar chart here and getting the exact information you want. We could also maybe just look at the top 5 batsmen. So what we'll do is we'll drag batsmen onto filters, and we'll create a conditional filter based on top here by field. So we'll say top 10. We wanted to look at the top 5, so we'll change that to 5. And we're looking at the top 5 batsmen based on the sum of their runs. So you could choose something else to filter it by, but we want it to be based on their runs. And we hit apply. And there we go, we just see the top 5. And again, if you just want to see the top 5 for 2017, here's the top 5 for 2017. Maybe 2016 and 2017 together, those are your top 5. Now, if we wanted to be able to change how many we see, as the developer, we could go in and change it here. But if we wanted our end user to be able to change it, then they can't, because when this is published, you can't change your filters. You can't change the filters that are the top conditional filters. We can change these filters that we show on the report called quick filters, but not this guy. We can see now that it's choosing top 5, but we can't select it. How many? So let's get rid of that card. And let's make a parameter that will allow them to select it. So create a parameter, and we're going to call this top n. We're going to make it an integer, and it's going to be a range. We'll let them choose between 5 and 30, and they can go up and down by 5. We'll click OK. So now we have here at the very bottom parameters, and we can right click on it and click show parameter control. And now we have this parameter over here called top n. It's set to 5, and then if I change it to 10, nothing's happening. And that's because we made the parameter, but we haven't put it anywhere in this sheet. So we're going to put it right inside of this filter. So you come here, and we want to choose top how many. You can do it based on a parameter, and we'll do it based on our top n parameter. Okay, so now when we change it from 5 to 10, the parameter updates the filter. So in presentation mode, the user can come in and choose how many they want to see. Now we've only let them go up to 30, but that's to your discretion. You could have this parameter do whatever you need. So we could say they can go up to 100, and that changes our parameter. Now we have all these little marks in between, and here I chose 80, 55, or you could even make it so that they don't have a step size. They just have a range, and then they have just this little slider, and it could be any number in between, but not lower than 5 and not bigger than 100. Let's remove this filter, and we will also hide this card because we won't give them the option to choose how many they want to see in this case. We'll just show them all. So for this next visualization, we're going to look at our top 5. And we're going to see how they do over time. So again, we're going to start on by bringing on our batsmen. But we only want to see our top 5, so let's bring batsmen onto filters, and we'll do what I just showed with top 5. Now, since we don't have anything else on this visualization, it's not sure how to define the top 5. So we're going to do it with batsman runs, and we're going to have the sum of the batsman runs. So top 5 players over all time that have the highest sum of batsman runs. Highest sum of runs. So here we have them. And we're going to bring on their runs. And we'll sort them biggest to smallest. And next we're going to bring on a time element so we can see it over time. So I'm going to drag date over here. And now it's doing a line chart for with a dot for every year. And I'm going to change year from the discrete year to the continuous year so that it's an axis down here. And now we can see them over time. We can bring batsmen onto color so we can see the different color for each batsman. And here's how they're trending. And then we'll also bring the batsman runs onto label. And now you can see how many runs they had. Next we're going to take a look at finding out who our leading bowlers are. So let's bring all of our bowlers onto a visualization. One way to look at this would maybe be to see which bowlers have the least runs associated with them. So we can bring the runs up here and then sort it smallest to biggest. However, they could have very few runs associated with them because they don't bowl very often. So let's bring on match ID and change it to be a measure that is a count of match IDs. And we can see that a lot of these with the least amount of runs also have the least amount of matches. So it's not a very good indicator. We have here what's called a dismissal kind. And you can see the reasons that the batsman was dismissed. And one of them is hit wicket. So you can see any of the bowlers that hit the wicket. So let's bring dismissal kind onto filters and we'll just look at those that hit the wicket. So we have these ones that have hit the wicket, and let's see how many times they did that. So we'll actually bring on down here number of records. And we'll sort it biggest to smallest. So now we can see that this bowler has hit it twice in our limited set of data. If we include all of the dismissal kinds, except for null, so this means that they were dismissed for any of these reasons, we can see which bowlers had the most dismissals. And let's bring bowler onto color. Great, and we'll rename it. To leading bowler. And we're going to do a similar thing as we did with top 5 batsmen with bowlers. So we could start with this visualization and replace by right-clicking and click duplicate. Let's bring it to the end. And now, instead of top 5 batsmen, we can change it to bowlers. But first, let's bring in our dismissal kind and only choose the ones. So here we can click exclude, and we're going to exclude null and hit apply. So we don't have the nulls anymore, we just have the ones that were dismissed. And we're going to bring in the bowler on top of the filters, and we're going to have it be based on the top count of dismissal kind. Top 5. Great. And we'll put bowler over top of batsman. And we'll take out the sum of batsman runs. And put on our number of records. And batsman didn't get removed when I pulled bowler on top of it, so I must have accidentally pulled it in front of it. There we go, batsman's gone. Now here's a disadvantage to making a copy and then changing it, because it's like, what's happening here? But it's because batsman is still on color and sum of batsman is still on runs. So let's take number of records and put it onto runs, onto the text. And then let's take bowler and put it onto color. That clears things up quite a bit. So now we can see the bowlers over time. If we take year of date off, we can see which ones are the best overall, and we'll sort it. There we go. And then we'll put year back on by dragging date up here, right-clicking and changing it to a continuous. There we go. So now we have our top 5, and we need to rename this to top 5 bowlers. Okay. So now we have all these visualizations, and we can start putting them together into dashboards. So let's make our first dashboard. We're going to have the size be automatic, so it fills the screen here. You have some options with the different sizes. You can have it be a fixed size, or you can define the width and the height. You could also define the width and the height based on some of these presets, like a desktop browser or a laptop browser. You could have it be automatic, so it fills the space. Now this will have it fill the space on any screen, so if they're looking at a much smaller resolution, then it'll try to squish all of your visualizations into one size. So I don't recommend automatic for a lot of visualizations, because you need to have extra space. Or if you define this should be here and this should be over here, then it will all squish it all together. There's also a range where it's sort of like it's automatic and it will adjust based on what screen you're looking at it. However, there is a minimum size, and it will never be smaller than that, and a maximum size, and it will never be bigger than that. So it won't stretch or shrink your stuff too far before adding scroll bars. So here we have automatic and our first dashboard. So we're going to rename our dashboard. We're going to call it overall performance. Oh, the first one we're going to make is going to be looking at venue and run scored. Great. So this is our dashboard space. So it says drop sheets here. And then these are our dashboards. And we have other objects down here that you can also bring on. And then over here we have layout, which after you have brought things on, you can change their layout here. And it will show your item hierarchy based on how they're nested down here. So on our dashboard, we will first bring in our matches, and we will bring in our top scorers. And we have all these different places for matches, and we have our different cities for our top scorers. And so if we go back to this sheet, top run scorer, we can do that in 3 ways. We can come down and find the right sheet and click on it to go to that sheet. We can look at our visualization and click this go to sheet, and it will take us to that sheet. We'll go back. Or we can come over here to our sheets and click go to sheet, and it will take us to that sheet. So let's take our filters off of the sum of runs so that we're showing all runs for all cities. You know what? Instead, let's just edit it so it's filtering out only those that never scored more than, say, 100. Okay, so we have a lot more in here, but it will filter out some of the lowest ones. And we'll go back to our dashboard. And now there's one thing you can do, which is called an action. And so we can click use as filter. And now when we click on a city over here, it will filter the remaining sheets on this dashboard to what you've selected. So we can see how many matches have been done in different cities, and if we want to see, well, who are our best players in Mumbai, it will filter down to the top run scorer. So that's called an action. So let's get rid of that, and we'll look at doing it manually as well. So here under dashboard, we have our actions, and you can see there are no actions in here. But then when I come and click use this filter, then we go to dashboard and actions, and now we have an action called filter 1 generated. And what that has done is made an action based off of the matches in each menu sheet, and it affects the other sheet on select, and when you unselect, see it says clearing the selection will show all values, and it's doing it based on all fields. Okay, so if we wanted to make a different action, which is a URL action, on these two sheets, when you select, it'll take you to this website. So this is the Wikipedia beginning page. But let's say we wanted to take you to a specific Wikipedia page. In Wikipedia, if you append on the name of the Wikipedia page to the end of this URL, it will take you straight to that page. And we're going to assume that there's a Wikipedia page for all these different cities. So we have city put in there. And if we hit OK, and now when we click on a city, then it will bring up the Wikipedia page for that city. So if we come back and we unselect that, and then we come over here and we pick a different city, it'll do the same thing and bring up that Wikipedia page. So right now it's if you click on either chart, it will bring up the Wikipedia page. We can edit that by maybe changing it so that it's only when you pick it in the top scorer chart. So when you select something over here, it filters the top scorer chart, but when you select on something in the top scorer chart, it brings up that city. And that's just an example, and now it's bringing up that page on a separate screen. So there we go. Now we're back. Okay. And some more things that we can do is we'll get rid of this visualization that is a legend for how big the circles are and what that means, because we have the labels right over top of the circles, so we don't need a legend for that. We'll close that. We have the capability of filtering on city right now, but when we do filter on city, it's only affecting this visualization and not this visualization. So we can change that by hovering over Apply to Worksheets and then changing it to Selected Worksheets and clicking All on the dashboard. And when I click Show All Worksheets in the workbook, you can see the rest of the worksheets that are not on the dashboard are not affected. Unselect, okay. And now when I filter these, it does it in both places. Another thing we can do to make this look a little nicer is make this a multiple values drop down. So now it's in a drop down form. We can also a horizontal object up here and put city up inside of there as kind of like a header. But we can have some more filters. So if we wanted to be able to filter by the date, we can put the date on filter there. We'll click Use All for now. Let's go back to our visualization. We'll click on the visualization we added it to and hover over Filters. And look, you can add year of date. Here it is. Let's put it up next to city. And we'll also change it to a multiple value drop-down list. And we'll also have it apply to selected workbooks all on dashboard. Okay, so now we can see the different years. If we only wanted to see maybe 2017, they both apply. Or they apply to both visualizations there. And we can have those, and we can add a blank object over here on the other side of city so that it doesn't take up quite as much space. We could put a text object up here too with the name of maybe the whole workbook or the sheet. There it is. But if we want to edit it, then we can make it bold and we can make it big. And those are some of the things we can do to update all of our different dashboard things. Our next dashboard is the one that's going to be about overall performance. We're going to change it to automatic again. And we're going to bring in information about performance. So we'll bring in the leading batsman and our leading bowler. Our top 5 bowlers will go underneath the bowler information, and our top 5 batsmen will go underneath the batsman information. You can see that any filters we had or any different legends we had are showing up here. We don't need these legends because we have the names right next to them. So let's get rid of those. When I clicked on the bowler in that last visualization, or in the last legend, it highlighted that particular bowler. So I had to unselect it before I closed it out. Okay, and then we had batting teams filter here, which we will not use. But we will use this year filter, and now if I change it, it will only affect this visualization, but I want it to affect all. So again, this is just a good habit to have, to make sure all of your filters affect everything on the dashboard that you want it to affect, and that it's very clear which ones it's affecting. Let's give it some space. We can move this whole piece to along the top here. It doesn't need that much space. And we'll change this to be a drop-down filter. And it doesn't need all of the space, so we can add some blank to either side and have it a little bit more in the middle here. So now we just want to look at 2017. We can see our leading batsmen and our leading bowlers, but then you can't see it over time anymore. So let's change our minds, and maybe we only wanted it to apply to worksheets, these 2 worksheets, because we want these worksheets to still show it over time. So if we click selected worksheets and we remove our top 5, now we can see that these worksheets update and these ones do not. But one thing to keep in mind is that these are the top 5 over all time, whereas these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the top 5 for this year. And so these top 5 are not the same people, you can see, as these top 5. Well, this one is. And this one is. But it's going to change, and so that's the point, is that it's important to recognize that these top 5 could update to just the top 5 for the year we selected if we still had it applying to these worksheets. So it's just your call. Information over time, when filtered to just one period, can be not very useful. So our next dashboard is going to be about advantage. And we're just going to make it so that we can see the advantage of the toss and the advantage of batting just side by side. So let's add a blank up here, blank down here. And it just gives you a visualization where you can see the advantage of winning the toss and the advantage of batting first. One thing that we're seeing here is that we're getting a scroll bar because it's too wide to fit in the selected area. So we could change the visualization to fit width, and then it will make this shrink to fit inside the area instead of giving us a scroll bar. We'll do the same thing here, fit width. If we change it to entire view, then it will also change the height to fill this area. Entire view. There we go. So as a recap, we have looked at different ways to look at data so that you can use it to help you in your decisions. You can use it to find out who are your top scorers in which cities. You can use it to figure out who is the advantage. You can use it to help you figure out if you should choose to go to the field or to bat. You can find your leading batsman and who should be worth more to try to get them on your team. Same with bowler. And you can put them together into dashboards that are interactive, even out to websites. Today we're going to talk about building dashboards in Tableau based on cricket data from the Indian Premier League. So we're going to get started, and in this visualization we're going to look at batsman information. So let me rename the sheet, and I'm going to call it All Innings Score. And so by the end of this, we're going to have two visualizations, two dashboards. One of them focuses on batsmen and one of them focuses on bowlers. Some of the use cases behind this is if you are trying to figure out who did the best of the batsmen and who did the best of the bowlers, for if you were trying to put together a team. So let's get started. We're going to look at batsmen. And here we have listed out all the batsmen. We're going to make this visualization so that you can look at just one batsman at a time. So I'm going to right click on batsman and click show filter. And now we have a filter over here with all of our batsmen, and we can choose just one or all of them. Let's just look at one for now. And then we're also going to look at their information across all of their matches. So we're going to bring on match ID. And now we have all of the matches for this batsman. Now we have quite a few matches, so we're going to allow them to filter to just one season, 1 year. So if I right click on date and click show filter, it gives me this automatic year filter. So we'll just filter to maybe 2014. And now we have all of those matches for 1 year for one batsman. And we want to look at the runs for this batsman. So we'll pull runs out here onto rows, and it now gives us bars for all of those rows. If we were looking at multiple batsmen, so I select all here, it'll section them out by their names, but it's a little bit difficult to tell where one batsman ends and one begins. Sometimes it's not that visually easy, even though there are lines, so we could make those lines darker, or another thing we could do is take batsman and pull it onto color, and now each batsman gets their own color, and it's a lot easier to tell the difference. Let's go back to just looking at one batsman. And let's sort the matches from smallest to biggest as in number of runs. So here we have all of the runs for this batsman per match. If we look at multiple batsmen, you can see how he did as opposed to other batsmen. There we go. Let's move on to our next visualization. It's going to be about, I'm going to click on the sheet, click rename, and click type of dismissal. So now we're going to make a chart that shows you for one batsman for 1 year what kinds of dismissals they had. So we want the filters we made on all inning scores over here to also apply to this worksheet. So let's talk about filters a little bit. When we right click on filters, we can hover over apply to worksheets, and we have these options. We have all using related data sources, all using this data source, or only this worksheet. And that's because we haven't built a second worksheet yet. We have another worksheet, but it doesn't have the batsman information on it. Come right click on year, same thing. So when I bring, or any information on this worksheet, We just need to have some information on this worksheet for it to start being taken seriously. So I drag dismissal on to color. I go back to this sheet, right click, and now we should have another option. Only this worksheet, selected worksheets, all using this data source, or all using related data source. We're going to use the option selected worksheets. Now, why would we use the option selected worksheet instead of all using this data source? This is because we're going to apply these filters to all of the batsman worksheets, but as I mentioned before, we're also going to make visualizations based on the bowlers, and we're not going to use this same filter on the bowlers worksheets. So I'm going to click selected worksheets, choose my worksheet, and hit OK. I'll do the same thing here on year, apply to worksheet, selected worksheet, and do the same thing. Okay, so because of filters and because how you can have different filters per worksheet, or one filter that affects two worksheets but not the other worksheets, it's best in my mind to do all of your filters at the end when you're actually building the dashboard, so that you can keep track of what the filter affects and what it doesn't. In this case, for our purposes, we've done it already, so now we're looking at just one batsman, just 1 year, but my preference is to do it at the end. Now, we brought on dismissal kind and put it onto color, and I want to make a pie chart, so I'm going to click on marks and change it to pie. And right now, there's nothing telling this visualization how big each slice of the pie should be, so you need to drag something onto angle. Let's first make the pie bigger, just so that we can see it better. And then let's also remove the dismissal kind of null. So we have null dismissal kind, and that's when the batsman did not get out. However, we're trying to keep track of how many times they did get out, so this isn't relevant. So I right-clicked on null over here and clicked exclude. What that did was made a filter right here on dismissal kind. And we click edit, and you can see it's excluding null. So that's what right-clicking and clicking exclude did. So right now it's doing 50 and 50. It doesn't know how big to make each angle, and we want it to count the dismissal kind, and that's how it'll determine how big to make each angle. So I'm going to drag dismissal kind onto angle, and I get an error. Why would I get an error? I would get an error because it's treating it like a dimension, and a dimension is by definition not something you use to measure things with. And so you can't say this angle should be this big based on a dimension. So we're going to change it to a measure, which is when we're going to count the dimensions. So we're going to do a count of dismissal kind. So if they got out because they were bowled out, then we'll count how many times that happened, and that will determine the red angle or the orange angle. And if it was caught, that will determine the red angle. So count. Great. So now we can see 5 and 6. So for this batsman for this year, he was out 11 times, 5 times because it was caught, 5 times because it was bowled. Let's control and drag dismissal kind onto label. So now we can quickly see the 5 and the 6. And we're going to control drag dismissal kind onto label, and we can see which kind of dismissal it was. That keeps us from having to need this legend. So we can click hide card, and we don't need that anymore. Now we're going to make another pie chart based on runs. So since I'm making a second pie chart, I'm going to duplicate this. There are some pros and cons to duplicating it. One of the pros is when we come up here to filters and we come to selected sheets, we can see that the filters that applied to type of dismissal are automatically applied here onto type of dismissal too. And so that's great news because we do want it to be filtered to just one batsman and just 1 year. However, we don't want it to filter out dismissal kind of null anymore, because now we're looking at runs, and runs need to have the times when they didn't get out. So we're going to pull dismissal kind off. And if you weren't paying very close attention or you copied it, then you might be confused as to why things were getting filtered out, but it was because it copied your filters as well. So that's one of the disadvantages of copying. Let's rename it runs distribution. and I'm going to pull off all of this information here so that we're starting from scratch. So here we have basically blank pie chart. And we're going to look at batsman runs. So there are a couple different kinds of runs that you can get. So I want batsman runs to determine color, but when I drag batsman runs onto color, it's doing a sum of batsman runs. And it's just trying to make it darker or lighter depending on how many runs there were. But that's not what I want. I want to use it as a dimension. And now we can see we have 0 through 6. And that means that a batsman either has 0 runs or 1, 2, 4, or 6 runs. Now there is 3 runs as well. However, because we're only selecting 1 year and 1 batsman, this particular batsman for this particular year only had either 0 runs, 1 run, 2, 4, or 6. So when we change it to a dimension, it's now, instead of summing up all of the runs, it is now just showing you their options. But it's still doing it like a scale from light to dark. I want 6 distinct colors, 1 for each. So I'm going to change it from a continuous type of field to a discrete type of field. And now I have 0, 1, 2, 4, and 6. Now I want to exclude 0 runs because I'm not trying to keep track of how many times they didn't get a run. I'm trying to keep track of how many times they got different kinds of runs. So again, let's exclude it. And now we have our 4 different kinds. And just to show this, I right-clicked on year, I click show filter, and if I show all the years, you can see our 5th kind of run where they got 3 runs on 1 ball shows up. So it does exist, it just didn't happen for this particular batter or batsman during that year. Now we want the angle to be determined by batsman runs. However, we don't want to sum up the batsman runs. We don't want to take every time that he got a 6 and do 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6. What we want to do is count how many times he got a 6. So we're going to change it from a sum to a count. And you can see he got a 6 24 times. And so before, let's go back, it was taking 24 and timesing it by 6, which is 144, and summing up each of those times. But instead we want to count each of those times and see how many times he got a 6 and how many times he got a 4, not how many points were scored when by getting a 6. So that's a little bit of a confusing thing to think about. Another thing you could do is, instead of doing a count of batsman runs, let's pull that off, you could use this number of records field, and that will show us how many, meaning the number of records, how many records did we have from this batsman in this year that showed that he batted a 6. So drag number of records onto angle, and you see we get the same thing that we had before. So those are 2 ways of doing it. Either change the batsman runs to a count, or grab number of records. Number of records is a little bit simpler. So let's also bring number of records onto the label, and we can see quickly that mostly he got 1s and got more 4s than he got 2s, actually, which might be interesting to people who are trying to see how well this batsman does. Our next visualization has to do with the batsman's strike rate. So we'll make our new sheet, season strike rate. And we'll need to make a calculated field to be able to determine the strike rate for a batsman. So we'll come here to this arrow, click on it, and click Create Calculated Field. We'll call it strike rate. And we're going to find out how many runs that a batsman gets basically for every 100 balls bowled. So we're going to get the total of the runs by doing a sum of batsman runs. We're going to divide it by the number of balls bowled. We know that this data set is 1 row per ball bowled. It's the ball by ball data. So we're just going to divide it by the number of rows. number of records. And we're going to put all of that in parentheses. And one thing I need to do is, instead of just number of records, I need it to be the sum of number of records, so that it adds them all up before it divides it. Okay, so sum of the runs divided by the sum of the bowled balls, and we will multiply that by 100. And that is our strike rate. Okay, so now that we have our strike rate, we can start building our visualization. We would like to have both of these filters, so I'm going to quickly apply it. So first build the visualization and then apply it. We're going to come here and bring date onto columns, and it's giving us 1 per year. We're going to change our marks card. No, let's leave our marks card the way it is. And then we are going to bring on our bowler, and we're going to bring on our strike rate next to bowler. Okay, so now that we have kind of the beginnings of our visualizations, let's go here and we can now apply it to our new worksheet. Apply the existing filters. One of the reasons it's so important to apply the existing filters to our worksheet. There we go. Now we can quickly see his strike rate for 2014. I'm going to control drag strike rate onto label, and we have it there as well. Okay, one of the reasons it's so important to use the same filter that is applied to all of these selected worksheets, instead of just bringing batsman back on and making our new filter each time, is we want on the dashboard to just have one filter that applies to all of them. So you can see here when I change this to 2015 and remove 2014, and then we go to season strike rate, we can see this one's also 2015 now. And we'll go back to 2014, season strike rate, and this one's also 2014. So we want, whenever a filter is changed, for it to affect all of the visualizations associated with our dashboard. And so all of our visualizations that are about batsmen and their information, we want to be able to use the same filters. So I'm going to click Show Filter quickly, and we're going to see what happens to this dot when I add more years. So this is going to allow them to see the strike rate per 100 balls over time if they select more periods. Our next visualization is going to be called Team versus Player. And we're going to see how many runs a batsman scores against particular teams. So we're going to bring on bowling team, because that's the team the batsman is against. We're going to bring on batsmen and their batsman run. So now we can see how many runs each batsman scored against all of these different teams. And again, we're going to apply our filters. There we go. Let's also bring batsmen onto color again, just for when we're looking at multiple batsmen at once in our filters. And we're going to bring the batsman runs onto label. There we go. So now we can have it in both places instead of just pulling it off and putting it on the new one. Great, team versus player. And our last visualization for the batsman dashboard is going to be called Balls per Boundary. So we're going to see how many balls bowled it takes for a batsman to get a boundary. But we have balls per boundary calculated here, and also a boundaries count calculated here. However, we're going to show you how to make our own versions of these calculations. So I'm going to create a calculated field. I'm going to call it boundaries count. And it won't let me save it as boundaries count because I can't have it saved as the same name. At least in Tableau Desktop, that's true. It looks like Tableau Public isn't getting mad at me for that. So, but I'm going to change the name to boundaries count calculated, so we can tell the difference between the one that existed and the one that we calculated. And we are going to do an if statement. So if the batsman runs, the individual batsman's runs, not the sum over whatever we select. If batsman's run is greater than or equal to 4, then 1, else 0. So it's giving me an error because I always need to have an end whenever I do an if statement. And this shows that whenever a boundary happens, so if they scored 4 or 6 on one ball, then we'll count it 1, otherwise 0. And if I sum this up, then we'll be able to count how many boundaries they had. So apply. Okay. And for example, if I brought on a batsman, all the batsmen, and I brought on boundaries count calculated, this should be counting up how many boundaries they had over all time. So that's the numbers we're getting here. Okay, let's back it out. Now we're going to make our new calculated field called balls per boundary. Calculated. Just so that it's clear which one is which. And we're going to count all the balls. So this is for every ball bowled. So we're counting the balls. We could also use the number of records here, similar to what we talked about earlier. And we're going to divide it by the sum of the boundaries count calculated. So this will show us how many balls it takes to get a boundary. Apply. Okay. Great, now we can start building our visualization. And we are going to bring on batsmen onto columns. And we're going to bring balls per boundary calculated onto rows. And now it's showing us how many balls it takes for the boundaries. Let's also bring batsmen onto color. I've got to hold control when I do that. There we go. So we have batsman here and batsman here. And we're going to do the same thing. Hold control, drag this down to label. And we can see the exact number. And for the final time, we're going to apply our filters. Now, I could have waited and applied my filters at the very end once I had all of these built. Again, I do recommend applying your filters at the end. Now we're going to put together the first of our 2 dashboards. So I'm going to click on dashboard here. I'm going to change it to automatic size, which will fill my screen. And I'm going to change it back to fixed size. So now we have our width and our height based on what automatic size was. Let's just round it out a little bit. So instead of 1678, I'm going to change it to be just an even 1600 and same even 900. So now we have our fixed size here. There's also, you could change it to a laptop browser or a full screen. So if we click full screen, there's that size. Generic desktop. I'm going to go back to my size. The size that works for you is going to be based on the size that works the best for all of your users. So that will take some research on your side. And before I get started, I'm going to do some formatting of my dashboard. So I'm going to click Format here, and I'm going to change the default shading for the dashboard to this particular shade. You can use this color selector or all of these different kinds of basic colors. And so it just gives it a different color than just the basic white. So that's a quick way to change the whole dashboard color And I'm also going to bring on some text for the title of the dashboard. Let's name our dashboard. We're going to call it Batsman Performance. Let's actually spell it out there. Okay. And then down here it says Show Dashboard Title. So I'm going to select that, and we have Batsman Performance there at the top. If you don't want the title here to match what's here, you have a couple options. So you can click Edit Title and put in whatever you want. You can also we'll click Floating here, and we're going to just drag text on here. And that allows you to be able to make your own title like that as well, or just whatever text you need to put on your dashboard. So we'll just remove that from our dashboard. And we're going to bring on our visualizations, but we're going to bring them on as floating visualizations. So I've selected floating here versus tiled. Floating allows you to bring something on and drop it, and wherever it lands is where it lands. And you can move it around, and it's not going to try to automatically fill this area. If I change it to tiled, and I bring this on, it'll fill the area, or I'll put it to the left or the right, and it will fill those sides. So back to floating. Floating has some benefits where you can just drop things and they will land there. However, if you make it floating, then you have to adjust the size of each individual thing instead of just, say, if we brought it on, undo that, as tiled, and we brought on this, and we brought on this. If I wanted to adjust the size of these things, I can just drag this little line in between, and it just tiles them and they fill the space you give them. Versus with floating, when I bring on this, and I bring on this, then I have to, if I want to adjust the sizes, I can make this one smaller, and then I need to make this one bigger independently of that. So there are some pros and cons of doing it either way. But we are going to do it the floating way. And we are going to bring on team versus player first. And put it here. Then we're going to bring on, underneath that, type of dismissal. So basically all of our dashboards, one at a time. Here's where our balls per boundary goes. Our runs distribution goes over here. And it brings in whatever filters you showed at the time and all the legends that are showing up on that visualization. So if I go back to runs distribution, you can see we had gear and that legend on there, and it brought them in as well. Let's also bring on season strike rate, which also had year, and all inning score. Okay. So this is the one that had all inning score, if you recall, was the first one we made that originally had our two filters. So we're going to change our filters from multiple value list to multiple value drop down. And that causes it to take up way less space. It still has an incredible height, so we're going to go to layout and we're going to change the height to something more reasonable. 100 just brings it onto the screen so that I could drag it like that. There we go. And then, year of date. We're going to edit this one, let's see, to be multiple value drop down as well. And again, a more reasonable height for a multiple value drop down. Okay, so we've got started. We have this legend here for color for batsman, which we're going to remove because it has the name on it generally. And we're going to figure out how wide we want these to be. So we need all three of them to fit in our width 1600. So that would be a width around 500 each. So let's go to layout here. And we're going to change the width from 533 to 500 on each of these visualizations. And that gives us some extra space to go in between them all. It's a little bit more reasonable, the space in between. There we go. And run distribution. So once I've kind of figured out my spacing to go in between them, I can line up these bottom ones by matching the y or x value. So this x is 25, and this one I want it to line up with it up and down, so I'll change my x to 25, and it shifts it over. This one is 555, so I'm going to change this one. And this one, I'm just going to copy and paste this one into this one. Now we kind of have the x figured out, and I want them all to line up along the y as well. So I'm going to take this 170, and I'm going to apply the 170 to all three of these so that they line up perfectly. This is another benefit of having it be a floating object, because on a tile object you can't determine their position exactly, otherwise it would mess up all of the tiles around it. But you also don't need to put them quite as precisely in order, because when you do tiled, it kind of lines them up along lines as they are tiled. Great. So this is a lot more straightforward. Let's get these. I'll get this guy about where I want it, and then I'll line this one up with it. Up and down. There we go. We can also come here and edit the title and just make the font a little bit bigger on both of these. And now let's make the worksheets here individually a little bit closer to the color that we picked for our background. So I'm going to right click right on top of the chart and click Format. Then I'm going to go to the shading section, and on the worksheet I'm going to choose more colors. You see the color that we selected before for the background is in this little palette of recently used colors. And I want one that's slightly different than that, so I'm just going to enter in the one that I want, and I'll copy that so I can use it on the others. However, if I did want the same color as I had there, I could just select it right out of the recently used colors. Okay. And there we go. We'll come here, right click on the chart, click Format, Shading, and gonna paste in that color. And you see when I clicked from here to here, it kept me right on that same sheet. However, you see that this went to white instead of the darker color I had before. And so I don't even have to click Format again. I can just come here and paste in my color. So I have a color that matches more closely to my background color, but is still different enough that I still have the outline, kind of the shape of having like cards on this dashboard. We'll go full screen here. We now have our dashboard that allows us to see all of the batsman performance information for whatever batsman we choose and whatever year we choose. So when we change the year, all of the charts update. We want to change the batsman to one of these Chris's. There we go. Some of them aren't in the year 2014, which is the problem we were having. There we go. So now we see all of the same information, but for Chris instead. So now that we've made our batsman dashboard, we're going to move on to making our bowler dashboard. Our first visualization for the bowler is going to be called Bowler Performance Against Team. It's very similar to the one that we made for batsmen, only it's showing how the bowler has performed against batting teams and the wickets that they got against those batting teams. So we're going to bring on the batting team so we can see all of the batting teams against them. We're going to bring on bowler so that it separates it out by bowler. One more try. We'll also put bowler onto color. And we're going to bring on player dismissed. No, sorry. We're going to bring on dismissal kind. We brought on dismissal kind, but I want to change it to be a measure and a count of the dismissal kinds. And let's put it here. So now we have a bar chart for the dismissal kind. You can see that it's going 0 to 30 for each of these. And that's because we have some that go all the way up to 30 against a team. And if we wanted, we could edit the axis and change it to be independent axis ranges for each row or column. So now we can see that it is 0 to 2 for this guy, but 0 to 30 for this guy. And that can be nice when you want to be able to look at them independently. However, when we're looking at them side by side and you're trying to compare, we would think that maybe this person did just as good as somebody like this person. So we're not going to do that because it could be misleading. Also, in the end, I'm going to have filters so that we're looking at one bowler at a time and 1 year at a time. So we won't need to see them all at once. Okay. We have bowler on color. Let's also control drag the count of dismissal kind on the label. So now it's labeled. Some of them are going to have a lot fewer against teams. Maybe they didn't play as many seasons and that they might have a lot more. That's why we're going to have the filter for a per season number. But we're not going to do that right away. Okay. Next workbook. Worksheet. And we're going to call it bowler versus player. So when we're looking at this at one bowler at a time, we can see how the bowler has done versus particular players. So we're going to bring on the batsman here. And then we're going to bring on dismissal kind here. And again, we're going to change it to a count measure. And we can count all of the dismissals against particular players. When we filter it down to one bowler, we can see how they did versus certain players, and then in just 1 year. Let's sort biggest to smallest. We're going to bring batsman onto color. And that way when we switch from bowler to bowler, we could kind of see which batsmen fall in certain areas. It also just makes it quick to follow it along to the edge. And we could put count of dismissal onto label here so that it's easy to quickly see. However, when we filter it down to just one bowler and 1 year, then there's going to be a lot fewer dismissals per batsman. So it'll be pretty easy to see. So let's not do that. Let's go on to our next worksheet. And this one is going to be called bowling average. So we need to create a bowling average calculation. It's going to be runs conceded per wickets taken. So we have to come up with our runs conceded, which is all of the batsman runs. We'll sum those up and divide it by the number of wickets, which is the count of dismissal kind. And now we have our bowling average. There is a bowling average that already existed, so again, we're going to call it bowling average calculated so that we know which one's ours. Okay, apply, done. And we're going to bring on the bowler
and bowler onto color. And let's bring on our bowling average calculated. We're going to sort it biggest to smallest. It might be better to sort it smallest to biggest. But some of these players might not have played or bowled, so that's why we'll have nulls. So, biggest to smallest it is. And let's also bring the bowling average that we made onto the label. Great. Our next sheet, we will also need to make a calculated field for this one. And let me hurry and name it, and then I'm going to go back to bowling average because I had one more thing to do there. Economy rate is our next sheet. Okay, so for bowling average, we have a situation where maybe somebody doesn't know what the bowling average means. So you can right-click on your chart in the outside area, outside of the graph area, and click on caption. And the caption will pop up. And it's automatically making a caption, which is bowling average calculated for each bowler. It's just describing what's happening. And then it says color shows details about the bowler, which it does. And the marks are labeled by the bowling average calculated. So when I double click on the caption, I can change it to be whatever I want, which I'm going to put runs conceded per wicket taken. And now we have a caption that kind of is describing what this visualization means. So on economy rate, the economy is defined as the number of runs conceded for each over bowled. So instead of the runs conceded per wicket taken, it's for each over. So we're going to create our calculated field. We're going to call it economy calculated. Again, we have to get a sum of our runs. There's our runs. We're going to divide it by the count of the balls. So this will tell us how many balls were thrown. But we don't want how many balls were thrown. We want how many overs there were. So just to make this a little more clear, I'm going to put parentheses around this. And we're going to take, there are 6 balls thrown in an over, so we're going to take the number of balls and divide it by 6 to get the number of overs. So we'll take batsman runs, and then this is per over. Hit OK. And for this visualization, it's going to be pretty similar to the last one, where we're going to bring on economy, and we're going to put economy onto, I'm going to hold control and put it onto label. Sum of economy. Oh, it's not even using my calculated field. So, economy calculated. There we go. Now it's much more reasonable. We'll drag economy calculated onto label. And since this dashboard is going to be meant to be viewed one bowler at a time, we're going to not split it out by bowler in this situation. But you could. And if you do split it out by bowler, that means they could select more than one bowler at a time and see their economy side by side. Also here, we can see that it says economy calculated for our label. And if we hit edit axis, we can change the title. So we're just going to call it economy. Probably need to do the same thing for bowling average. There we go. Edit axis. Bowling average. Okay. It got mad because I didn't close it. And then there we have it. Again, I'm going to right click in some empty space and click caption. And then we have our caption here. Edit caption. And we're going to put average runs conceded. Okay. There we go. We have our caption. We have our chart. And we have one more visualization to make for our dashboard. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please put them below, and somebody from the Simplilearn team will help us answer those questions. Or if you have an answer to somebody else's question, feel free to chime in. We'll get a good discussion going. The last one is called a dismissal. And we're going to look at, kind of like we did before, type of dismissal, but this was the batter and how they got dismissed, whereas this is the bowler and how they took the wicket. So we are going to also make a pie chart, which means dismissal kind goes on to color, and we change the marks to pie. So we have a pie that shows a color for each of the dismissal kinds. Again, let's remove null. So again, I came over here, right-clicked, and clicked exclude. But you can do it right on the visualization. Dismissal kind, and you say, oh, it's blank instead of bold or cotton bold. And click exclude there. So there it makes our filter. Next, we need to determine the angle size. We're going to bring on number of records. And the more records that fall under that dismissal kind, that means the more often that kind happened. And let's bring number of rows, number of records onto label as well. And also, we're going to entire view so that it's nice and big and easy to read. And we're going to add a caption. And we're just going to put dismissal types. We'll see how that comes up on the visualization. So now that we have made all of our visualizations for our dashboard, let's add our filters. So just on this last one, I'm going to bring bowler onto filter, and we're going to click use. Let's actually select a bowler. You can use this box to search. There we go, and it's popped up. You see how I didn't even have to start searching it at the beginning of the name. It's just smart enough. So we have our bowler. Let's bring on date. We're going to choose years. And let's choose 2016. And we have our year. And now let's apply it to all the worksheets that it applies to. So dismissal, economy rate, bowling average, bowling versus player, and bowler performance against team. Same for year. Okay, and you can see how much quicker that is to apply instead of doing it every time you make a new dashboard. So, much quicker, saves you some time, can be confusing, so make sure you do it, because if you forget to do it and then you change a filter on a dashboard and it only changes one of the visualizations on that dashboard, then it can be really confusing. And like on the batsman performance, if we had forgotten to add these to all the visualizations and we left it off of this visualization, then people could be confused as to why that's not changing. Or off of this visualization, if it's not changing, it's hard to know if it's not changing because it didn't change from year to year. Maybe his types of dismissal were the same from year to year. Or it's just hard to tell the difference and see if it's not affecting it. So always be sure to double check that your filters are applied to everything you need them to be applied to. Let's make a dashboard. Okay. We're going to make it what we made it before. 1600 by 900. And you can see all of our sheets are showing up. But let me show you a quick trick here. This dashboard uses all of the batsman sheets, and we don't use any of the batsman sheets again inside of the second dashboard. So if I right click on the batsman performance and I click hide all sheets, it doesn't hide all sheets, it just hides all sheets associated with that dashboard. And now you no longer see those sheets. And then I come to dashboard 2, it's only showing me the sheets that are not hidden for that dashboard. Let's get started by first changing our dashboard color. So I came to dashboard and I hit format. And I'm going to change the color to this blue color. And there's our background. And then I'm going to click show dashboard title, which is dashboard 2 right now. So let's rectify that right now. And we're going to call it bowler performance. And here we have bowler performance. Let's do floating, which is already selected. And we're going to bring on bowler performance against team. And we're going to go side by side with bowler versus player. And it's brought on, both of these have brought on legends that are actually not helpful because we have labels that tell us these things. So we're going to get rid of these legends. Sometimes I wait till I have brought on all of my dashboards before I remove legends or change filters. So all of my worksheets. Sometimes I wait till I've brought on all my worksheets. I'm going to bring on bowling average and economy rate and dismissal. Here's an actually useful legend, so we'll keep that around. Remove this legend because right there, it just tells you right next to it. And now let's start adjusting our charts. So I'm going to make these two side by side up here, so they need to split the space. So let's try a width of 750, which gives you a little bit of space side to side, but still uses the space a little bit better. You can see that this visualization is too tall to fit inside of the area we've given it, so it has a scroll bar here on the side. If you change how this fills in its space, so right now it's standard, you can have fit width, which it's already fitting the width of the area that is provided. If you do fit height, it's going to force everything to fit inside of that area, so there's no scroll bar, and it does not look good for this visualization. And then entire view, it's the same thing. It's trying to make everything fit inside that area. So we're going to go back to standard. Another one that's good for things where you do want the scroll bar up and down is fit width. So either of those look good. These two are going to share space underneath this one. And so I'm going to make them both, let's say, 300. How does that look? That looks good. Let's make this one the same size as this above it. 750. Bring it over. Okay. You notice one thing that's happening here is we cannot see, at this point, the filters. There are no filters popping in here, even though we added filters. Now, why would that be? That's because we have no filters being shown on our visualization. None of our worksheets showed the filters, they just existed here. So, if we come and we click on one of our visualizations, click the drop-down arrow, and we go to filters, we can see all of the filters we can select from. We're going to bring on bowler. Let's make it the drop-down. And again, it's just made it a really unreasonable height because it was trying to fit all of those bowlers. But 20 is too small. There we go. And we'll go here and also bring on year of date. What's the height on this one? 55. 55 is a good height. Now it's time to clean it up a bit. So we have all of our pieces. Let's first make sure when I change this that everything changes. So when I unselect 2016, they should all go to null, and when I click fit 2015, they all update. That's what we want to see. Okay, so we have all the pieces. We just need to get them lined up, looking nice, and just getting things a little bit more clean. Like here, we want to show our caption that we added. And here. And here. So this kind of is something that you can use on your dashboard to describe things that are happening or different pieces of it. It's just an easy way to add a caption. And then let's line them up and down. I think that we could probably make both of these a little taller. What do we think about 350? maybe even 400. And we'll bring these ones down. That's really nice for this visualization to have more space. Just a little bit more space. Whatever you can give it, honestly, is really helpful. Sometimes with these visualizations that are up and down, I like to give them the whole side to themselves. So maybe we would move this over and make it smaller, and these all three would fit right here, and then I'd give this one all of this up and down space. I'll undo that. We can move this legend over a little bit more. There we go. And then let's start lining things up. I like where this one is positioned on the y-axis, so I'm going to copy that and bring it over here. They were pretty close. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the y-axis for these ones, just to make sure they're perfectly lined up. These, it looks like I could make a little bit wider, if you would like. One thing that's happening here is it looks a little bit like this one has more up and down space than this one does. And that's because it's missing this label. And it also isn't colored the same as these other ones as it represents the bowler. Well, we can fix that, because if you remember, we did not put bowler onto the columns. We put it on there. There's our label. We also didn't put it onto color. And there we go. So that gives us a little bit more consistency between these two visualizations. However, they're still labeled economy rate and bowling average with their captions at the bottom there. Okay. And since these are the same width, I would like to line them up on the x-axis. So I'm going to take this there, and that lines those up. I want to make sure that these are lined up and down, pretty close, but not quite there. There we go. And also, year of date is not necessarily what I want. The of date part is just not useful for what we need. So I'm going to change it to year. I'm also going to center it. We'll come here for bowler and center that one as well. Center. And also, let's make it a little bigger. See how it did not make it bigger? That is because the formatting in here, such as changing the font or bolding it, requires you to have whatever text you want selected. So now it's bigger. There we go. I like the white on the blue, so I won't change these individual dashboards or individual worksheets to be a different color. Let's take a look. Here we have our second dashboard. If we come here and we click Hide All Sheets, now you can only see the two dashboards in these tabs at the bottom. And you can see that we can have different years for the two different dashboards. You could tie the year together. Oh, we have year of date on this one too. Let's change that. So, that's not what I meant to click. There we go. Edit title. We're going to make it centered. We're going to make it bigger. Don't press enter when you're not done. Now we're going to erase of date. So that's just year. Do the same thing over here. This just adds a little bit of consistency. They are two separate dashboards. But if people are going to look at them side by side maybe, or one right after the other, it is nice to have some consistency. There we go. So, there you have it. We have made two dashboards. One of them about batsman performance, one of them about bowler performance. During this time, we learned about formatting our dashboards. We learned about floating versus tiled, and about positioning legends and filters, some of the options we have for changing filters. We learned about different ways to make different visualizations. So we made pie charts and bar charts. And we also learned about applying filters to just the worksheets that you want for those dashboards. And finally, we learned about adding captions. Thank you for watching Tableau tutorial. For more information, visit www.simplilearn.com. And if you have any questions, please comment below. Thank you and have a great day.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.